Hey everybody, this is Mike with the One Stop Co-op Shop, and today I'm reviewing Encounters Shattered Waste, the cooperative JRPG-inspired boss battler for 1 to 4 players. And disclaimer that I got a review copy of this one. In Encounters, 2 to 4 heroes will face off against one of 8 unique bosses, facing their strength cards that are deploying in different areas, moving around to defend each other and attack the cards until they can eventually stagger the boss and wound them enough to get them to shift into their Dark Souls-style harder version. If they can defeat that, they win the battle. And the core mechanics of the game are resolved through dice-based combat and recovery systems, while the 8 different character classes try to balance their threat, magic points, hit points, multiple different ability cards, and they can even switch to a shattered version that unlocks new abilities at the cost of their soul, I guess. So let's discuss 5 key things about Encounters Shattered Wastes. So for my number 5 point, I'm looking at a bonus mode that comes in the game, Journey Mode. This was not in the game when I previewed it. And this is a survival-style campaign game where you go through each of the 8 bosses of the game in order while trying to keep your rosters of heroes alive. On the positive side, they give you a lot of cool levers to mess with in this mode, like you can make the bosses harder, and there's nothing stopping you from using these same triggers in the base game. Additionally, probably the coolest thing is that as you fight the bosses, you unlock unique equipment keyed to them that can give you all new combos and awesome powers with your abilities. But on the negative side, and this might be based on my own personal taste, the style of campaign they chose to go with, where it's a survival endurance match with your roster getting weaker and weaker, means you're not going to see the toughest and later bosses as much if you play this mode multiple times, because you might stall out halfway through the campaign and then have to fight all the easier ones again. Well, my number 4 point is a full pro for my taste, and that's the boss variety in the game. So there are 8 bosses, and as I mentioned, you could bring in some of the difficulty modifiers from the campaign. Additionally, they have these location cards you can add in to make any given boss play differently and be more challenging. But even just on their base level, the bosses are quite different. Like, there are some that try to possess you, there are ones that switch back and forth between different forms instead of switching for the entire time, and even just their basic statistics and how many cards they're adding to the battlefield, how dangerous it is to leave cards on the battlefield before they hit you automatically, and how they all change when they go to their wounded side, and the unique rage cards they hit you with sometimes. All this stuff makes them feel pretty dang different, even though on first blush, the main thing you're interacting with round to round, the strength cards, do not change from boss to boss. Really, they do have a lot of variety between them. And that goes right into my number 3 point, which is a mix for my taste, and that's the core loop of the game, the stamina, fatigue, and wound system. So enemies start out in their guarded state, but as they spawn more cards and as you damage them and send them to this fatigue area, eventually they'll run out of cards in the stamina, and then they are staggered, and any damage you do is going to go to wounds, and if you do enough wounds, they'll eventually switch to their new form, and then you'll have to kind of go through the whole thing again. And on the positive side, this is probably the most interesting strategic level of the game, because while at first glance you think you just want to punch these things and punch them, actually you often want to let them build up, but if you let them build up too much, they're going to overrun the area and hit you with extra automatic damage. And sometimes instead of attacking, you just want to let them hit you while you recover, and you really want to set your characters up to do as much damage as possible whenever those staggered turns comes. You can send tons of stuff to wounds. But on the negative side, if you roll badly or get the timing off and you don't send things to wounds, the game can really feel like it stalls, especially against the tankier bosses. So there is some potential frustration here, especially if your strategy gets off or you roll badly on key rounds. And speaking of rolling badly or well, that's my number 2 point, also a mix for my taste. There's a huge potential for excitement here because each character has a critical value, and then a ton of the abilities and things will also help you modify your chance to hit or make it more or less likely for you to crit. And when you crit, these strength cards don't add threat to your character, which means it's easier for you to hit again next time, and they also go straight to wounds, so it kind of circumvents that entire fatigue stamina system I just discussed. So that's the exciting part, but when you roll badly, it really sucks because your characters are only getting 2 actions a turn, so wasting your entire action because you rolled poorly and missed, or the more common one, because often you have more control over your attacks, but when you're trying to recover to get your character back to a fighting state, and you only roll like a 1 or a 2 to recover, and you feel again like you almost wasted half of your entire turn, 1 of your 2 actions, that can be pretty dang frustrating, although just to note, there are some characters that give inherent mitigation with their abilities or extra actions when you fail, so you can pick one of those if the luck is really bugging you. And I mentioned the characters, that is my number 1 point, and that's also a full-on pro, because kind of like with the bosses, there is a ton of variety here in the 8 classes, but really the star of the show are the ability cards, because every game you're going to draw a little selection of cards and pick only 3 of them, and the crazy combos you can create are really diverse and varied from game to game, and give you a lot of exploration and fun and variety even playing the same character. Although that's also the one negative caveat for this point, that sometimes you just get cards that don't go well together, or you get cards that aren't really that useful. Some of them just feel way more niche and limited than others and don't really help you out almost at all. So overall, if you like boss battlers, if you like old-style JRPG turn-based combat, I think Encounters Shattered Waste could be a great one for you. It is a lot of fun to play around with the character combinations and go against tougher and tougher opponents. On the other hand, the die rolling and swinginess in the game might put some people off. And in the end, the core loop of the gameplay could be a bit repetitive unless you really get into playing around with those different bosses and character varieties and builds. And if you want to see the game in action, I did an updated playthrough recently. You can check it on the channel. Thanks for watching, everybody. Good gaming, and I'll see you at the next stop.